Okay, welcome. We are recording. Okay, so first of all, sometimes we talk about the same things, but I think it's helpful to go over the basics often, because the basics are basically it. We don't have to overcomplicate it. We can really try to keep it simple. So first is to get clear on our intention, our desire. What is it? Why are we here? What do we want? And what I propose is that what we want is we want to be free. So we perceive ourselves to be oppressed in some way. And this, we want to be free from this oppression. So if you disagree with that, you can let me know. We can certainly explore together to find out what it is that you are here for. But that's my proposal. So take a look and see if that's true. That you want to be free, and how could you want to be free unless you perceive somehow that you are oppressed? So somehow you perceive yourself to be oppressed. whatever story you tell about that, because we have various stories we can tell about that. At different levels, it can seem to be a different story, but I would say it always fundamentally comes down to that same essence, which is that we perceive that we're oppressed and we want to be free. So at a certain point in our lives, we perceive that the oppression is out there. So we perceive that our parents oppress us, our teachers oppress us, schools oppress us. We get a little older, and then it's our jobs, our employers, the government, they oppress us. Our homeowners association, whatever. It's like constantly being oppressed. And then maybe we get a little older and the story changes slightly and we realize, oh, that what is this really? What is this oppression? Somehow I realize some way that I'm doing it. But we still want to maybe just because we haven't been taught otherwise, we still want to imagine that we are, that we're actually oppressed, right? Because if you really see that you're doing it, you're not oppressed. So we still sort of project it at a distance, and we imagine there's something that's oppressing us. So we say, oh, it's my anxiety. Oh, it's this fear. Oh, it's this anger. Oh, it's the whatever of my life. It's something that's oppressing me. Some experience that I think somebody's unmuted. I'm just gonna mute all. there's something that we perceive as oppressing us. So again, take a look and see if this is true. Don't just believe that this is so. I mean, it doesn't do you any good. Even if I can speak to you the truth, even if that was possible, even if I could somehow speak the truth, it doesn't do you any good unless you actually discover it within yourself. So there is a transmission, I mean, we talk about sometimes in spiritual circles, we talk about transmission, and it sounds very woo, but there is a transmission, you see, because it's like what's being transmitted is, in a sense, it's truth to truth. And there's this apparent gap, and that gap is is between mind to mind. So mind says, okay, I'm over here separate, oppressed, and you're over there separate and oppressed. And so then, but there's something that's prior to that, something that is not dependent upon that, something that everything else is dependent upon. And that we could call truth, that we could call clarity, whatever we call it, it doesn't matter. But that is what is transmitted. So to receive the transmission, you have to look for yourself. The looking is the receiving. The looking is the receiving. So you have to look. So just look to see, is this true? You don't have to believe it. You have to look. So is it true that you're here because you perceive yourself to be oppressed and you wish to be free? And if you can see this, then we can start to take a look at what is it that, what hope is there? What can be done? What is possible? Because you can hear a lot of different messages, right? There's a lot of different teachings. You could go read books, watch YouTube videos. There's all kinds of things you could do. And you have to have some, well, I think it pays to have clarity about, is this, whatever this is this actually going to help me with what I want? So if I want freedom, if I perceive that I'm oppressed in some form or fashion by life, if I perceive that I'm separate and somehow a victim, if I perceive that there's something unsatisfying in my experience, if I perceive that there's a problem of some kind, and I want to be free, then I have to, I think, take a look at whatever it is that I'm considering as the possible remedy or solution, in light of, is it likely to actually help with what it is that I want? So if I go and I find some channeled teaching, okay, I'm not trying to pick on anybody. I mean, I'm sure that channeled teachings could have tremendous value. I don't know, but we have to really wonder. We have to question. How do I know? How do I have confidence that this is actually going to be of use? How could I know? I have to see, is this actually something that is that holds real promise? Does it even aim to? Does it even pretend as if it's going to address the thing that I'm really wanting, which is to be free from this perception of oppression? So how can we measure that? I mean, so one thing is, I think it's useful to see what, well, is this something that is there are a variety of criteria. One is it direct? Okay, I think that's an important criteria. So if when I say direct, I mean, are we even addressing the thing that seems to be uh, the actual problem that we're dealing with? So if we perceive that we're oppressed and we wish to be free, is this thing actually looking at? Are we actually taking a serious look, a serious inquiry into the perceived oppression, or are we dancing around it? Because if we're talking about anything other than the direct inquiry into what it is that is actually going on, then how can we have confidence that this is actually going to help? Might, but it might not. I mean, if this is going to help, anything could help. I mean, anything could help. Anything. You go to the, go to somebody who hits people on the head with a hammer. It might help, but is it likely to help? It doesn't seem too likely that it's going to help. So the more direct it is, the more directly that the process that we use uh, directly inquires into the nature of the problem, the direct experience, I think that's a good indicator that it may be useful. Which is why I am a fan of things that meet that criteria, right? So something that's direct, something that actually takes a look at what is the problem? Let's find out. Let's really find out. Okay, so if we perceive that we're oppressed in some way and we wish to be free, well, let's find out what this oppression is. Another another quality is that uh, if there's something that is something, well, let's say another facet of directness is that it's something that you can do. So I always give preference to things that you can do, that I can do, that one can do, that can be done without uh, too many dependencies, right? So what I mean by that is, if in order to do the whatever the work is, the inquiry, the looking, if that requires that you have to go to a specific place at a specific time with specific people and do very specific practices in very specific ways, and you have to learn a great deal in order to do it in those ways. If there's this whole there's a whole bunch of cultural baggage, that doesn't make it bad. I'm not saying that's bad. It may have tremendous value, but it's not as accessible. And so I always, whenever there is something that I'm aware of that is effective, that doesn't have all of those dependencies, I think that's better. So if there's something that you can do without having to go to a specific place at a specific time and do specific rituals, again, not that those things are necessarily bad, but just if you can not have to do those things, if it's something that you can do while you're driving your car, while you're in bed, while you're eating, if it's something that you can do uh, regardless of the language you speak, regardless of your customs, regardless of how many other people you have around you, regardless of whether you have specialists at your disposal, I think that's preferable, so long as it works. And so the ways that I advocate are not, I'm not going to pretend like they're the only way, or that they're always the absolute best, fastest ways. I mean, I think they're pretty good, but um, the but they are ways that are accessible and available to us, and they are direct, and they do meet the criteria of directness in that they're actually taking a look directly at what is the nature of the problem, because we have to get clarity on that if we're really going to resolve it. If we're going to resolve the problem, we have to have clarity on what the problem is, because otherwise we can go round and round and round and round and round for a lifetime or lifetimes. And what have we done? We maybe have done nothing because we didn't have clarity really on the nature of the problem. So you see, we can tell all kinds of stories for endlessly, you know, I mean, God, I see it in myself. I mean, it's insane. It's insane the how the mind will project the problem out there. Every day, it's always about something. It's about something or someone out there, always somewhat at a distance. And that's true whether we're talking about the problem is my neighbor, or the problem is the government, or the problem is the system, or the problem is my wife, or the problem is the weather, or the problem is my anxiety, or the problem is this pain, or the problem is whatever. It's always something that is at a distance, and where we are a victim of it. So we are oppressed by it. We perceive ourselves to be oppressed by it. So I propose, let's get clarity on the actual nature of the problem. Let's take a look. So let's take a look now. Let's see, because to me, this is good news. This is very, very good news. But I'm getting ahead of myself because we haven't gotten to the good news yet. But when we look, every time it's good news. So let's take a look. So let's actually look to see right now for ourselves. Okay, so we perceive that there's some kind of problem. We have to perceive that there's some kind of problem. So let's not lie about it, because if we lie about it, then how are we hoping that's going to help? You know, it's like the alcoholic who's in denial. But there's not a lot of hope there, you know. It's like, nah, I don't have a problem. Really? You're passing out drunk every morning at 10 a.m. I think maybe there's a problem. I'm fine. Okay. What are you going to do for that person? You can't do anything. So if we are going to say, no, everything's fine, everything's great, I don't have any problems, I'm here just for what? Why would you be here? You know, I mean, let's be honest. It's not like, you know, I mean, this is, I say this sometimes, I'm not that entertaining. So we can't be here because we're just, everything's wonderful and we've just got nothing better to do. We're here because we perceive that there's something wrong somehow. There's something wrong and we can't quite figure out what it is. And somehow we feel like maybe this exploration together will help us to gain clarity on what the actual problem is. So let's take a look. Let's first admit, yeah, okay, there's something that seems off. Can't quite get okay. I kind of like, every once in a while seem like I kind of get a little okay and then I'm not okay again. And I'm like, maybe I'm slightly okay and no, not okay. Never can quite get fully okay. So it can't sustain okay. So I feel as though I'm oppressed by some force. So let's take a look and let's find out. Let's find out in our direct experience. So then, hopefully, I know it's a lot of talking, but hopefully you're actually looking for yourself. You're following along. You're looking for yourself, because that's how this can be useful. So we're looking systematically right now. So you have to look for yourself and you have to see. And if you disagree with this, if you really, I mean, let me know. So I'll say, for those who are new and those who are not new, for everybody, I'm recording this. The recording will be going on YouTube. It will be publicly available. So I give that caveat because you are free and welcome to unmute yourself and ask a question or share something if it seems relevant. But you should know that that will be included in the recording that will be on YouTube publicly. So you would be giving your implicit consent to have that included in the video on YouTube, should you speak. Also, if you prefer to ask a question or share something anonymously, you may do so by using the chat feature here in the Zoom app, and you can send a message. You can send it to all, or you can send it to just me if you prefer. And let me know, though. Let me know if you're not seeing this, because it's in order for this to really be effective, for this to be useful to you, for it to be something other than entertainment and not very good entertainment, then you have to look, and you have to be willing to let me know so that we can look together. If you don't see this, don't believe that it's true just because I say it, and don't let the opportunity go by if it's not clear for you, right? Because this is an opportunity. It's an opportunity right now. I'm not going to tell you it's the only opportunity. Every moment is an opportunity, but this is an opportunity, right? So why wait? So if it's not clear to you what I've been saying, then if you can't see that in your own experience, let me know so we can explore that a little further. And so it's clear what I'm saying there, what I've been pointing to is that we perceive that there's some kind of problem in our lives. And that problem I'm proposing is that we perceive ourselves to be oppressed. And we wish to be free. We wish to be free of the oppression. And that oppression is something that we have projected into many things externally throughout our lives. Other people, institutions, systems, and then even our own thoughts and feelings, which we project at a distance and believe we are victims of. Hopefully that, since nobody's saying anything, hopefully that you're all like, yeah, this is obvious, please move on. Okay, so but it's to me it's so important, because otherwise we can get so we can spend a lot of time trying to identify the problem in thought. We can think about it a great deal, and you can Google it, and you can watch YouTube videos, and you can get all kinds of theories about the problem, right? You're experiencing ascension symptoms. Okay, what do I do about that? Oh no, you're experiencing mind control by the government. Okay, what do I do about it? No, you're experiencing fibromyalgia. Okay, what do I do about that? You can find endless stories, possibilities, but that, as you just leap around from one story to the next, to the next, to the next, and you think, I'm going somewhere, I'm getting somewhere, I'm getting closer. You're not getting closer. You take an honest look and you see, no, I've just been leaping from story to story. So we finally have to get clear on what is the actual problem, because if we can't get clear on what the problem is, then we're going to just keep leaping from story to story, and we'll leap from one thing to the next, and one supposed expert to the next, who's going to tell us, okay, do this thing, we'll do this angel reading, we'll clear your chakras with this crystal. And I'm not saying that all of that is absolute nonsense. Some of it may be totally legitimate, but we have to, if we want to benefit, it pays. We are paying ourselves to get clear on what is the actual nature of the problem, because then we can go about it much more systematically and directly. So if we see that it's a matter of oppression or perceived oppression and a desire for freedom, then let's take a look and see, well, what is this oppression? Okay, where does the oppression come from? Because there's I think, two possibilities. I mean, anytime anybody says there's two possibilities, they're full of shit. Let's tell the truth. But there's more than two possibilities. But we can grossly categorize the possibilities into two camps, let's say. Okay, so the possibilities could either be grouped as that the oppression is caused by something outside of me, right? It could actually be the government. Or the oppression is something that I am doing. Maybe there are other possibilities, but I think that kind of covers it. There's two general camps. It's outside or inside, let's say. So if it's about these forces outside of me, whether that's my wife or the government or some disease or whatever, okay, it's something if it's some force outside of me, well, that's not a good situation. That does not sound very promising. That sounds like a lot of struggle and battle, right? I mean, because who wants to be fighting with the enemy like that? That's not nice. So I think let's just discard that entirely. That in all of those possibilities that are something external to us, because frankly, it's just so unpalatable. I don't think we should even consider it unless we have to. Fair enough. I mean, we can come back to it if we need to, but let's just, because it seems so unpalatable and overwhelming, let's just not look at that right now. Let's instead take a look at what if the oppression that we perceive is actually caused within us, so that it's something that we are doing. And the reason I'm proposing let's look at this first is because if we can see that this is true, it saves us a whole lot of it's just about efficiency. It's just about efficiency, because there's so many possibilities out there of what it could be, what the oppressing force could be, that we could spend a lifetime trying to figure that out. It's like looking for a needle in a haystack. So let's only look at that if we absolutely have to. Let's start with, what if it is something that falls into this category of the cause is within me. So let's explore that possibility. So let's just look for ourselves to see if there is a way that we could prove to ourselves that we are doing, can we actually find out, can we prove one way or the other if we are the ones that do the oppression? Because if we can prove that we are the ones that do it, this could be, we might just be striking gold, you see, because if we can prove it, then what have we done in this? If we can prove it, then we immediately know that we can completely discard the infinitely many possibilities of the external oppressor. We don't even need to give our attention to that. We don't need to waste any energy on that, if we can prove that we are the ones doing the oppression. So that's good. And then the other thing that this does for us, which is why I say that this is like striking gold, is that if we can prove that, then we also are necessarily discovering, to some extent, how we do it. Now, the how we do it, I'll get a little bit ahead of myself. I'm leading you completely, by the way, because I know the answers already. But you have to look for yourself. You have to see this for yourself. Just me giving you the answers does no good. Okay, so I've learned this the hard way. You have to look for yourself. So, but I can get a little ahead of myself and say the fantastic thing is that when we see this, if we can prove to ourselves that we are doing the oppression, we start to see how we do it. And when we start to see how we do it, guess what? We don't have to do it. So there's a lot of subtlety to it, though. So we have to keep looking. I'm just wanting to make sure that you're set up with the right expectations. So it's not the this is not the approach that how do I say this? Okay, so the way that we are accustomed to, which is leaping from one story to the next, there's this constant there's a momentum to it. So we have this constant sense of I'm getting somewhere, I'm going somewhere, I'm escaping from something, I'm getting to something. And that gives us this sense that we are somehow going to escape the actual problem. Like we're not going to have to meet it. Because we always perceive that we're staying one step ahead of it. So this direct approach differs from that because we start to see that there's no real possibility of actually escaping from it. All we've been doing is exhausting ourselves and making ourselves miserable. So this can be somewhat challenging because our whole orientation has to shift. Up to a certain point, we sincerely, naively, innocently, genuinely believe that we are going to escape, that we're going to win, that we're going to gain freedom from the external oppressor, and that we're going to do this. You see, if you can defeat the external enemy, you never have to meet the enemy. The enemy always remains slightly at a distance. If you can defeat the external enemy. And so our hope has always been we can avoid it. And when we start to take a look in this way that I'm proposing, which we're getting to the meat of that here momentarily, but this can be challenging because it really is in opposition to everything that we have done. Everything that we have done has been trying to avoid meeting with the oppressor, with the enemy, always keeping it at a distance. Like if we absolutely have to, we're willing, maybe if we absolutely have to, push comes to shove, we're willing to get out our long sword and do hand-to-hand combat with the enemy, well, hand-to-hand, no, sword to sword. We don't want to get so close, right? We don't want to get that close to the enemy. We don't even want to have to touch the enemy. It'd be too close, so we'll use the sword if we absolutely have to. We would much rather use long-range missiles, much rather. But if we absolutely have to, we will put on our armor, we'll take our sword out, and we will go to battle in that way with the enemy, if we have to. But see, this approach that I'm proposing is radically different. Really, I mean, it doesn't maybe seem all that radically different because it just seems like what on earth is this guy talking about? This sounds like I can't even make sense of it at this point. But I promise you, it's radically different because fundamentally, the orientation is different. We are no longer, you have to understand this, we are no longer trying to avoid the enemy. We're no longer trying to avoid the oppressor. We're just wanting to understand, how do I do this? And as we discover how we do this, so it says, hold on, I gotta read the question. So it says, so I'm learning that I'm doing my anxiety, question mark. In other words, I could learn to drop the idea that it jumps on me. Yes. 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 And this continues to get subtler and subtler. There's a tremendous amount of subtlety to this to discover. But at each, as you discover the subtlety in it, each subtlety that you discover is in and of itself, it is revealing your inherent freedom. I'm getting way ahead of myself now, so let's come back to that, okay? But it's such an important point. Yes, you are learning that you are doing the anxiety, and to me, this is absolutely life-changing. This discovery, which is it's an ongoing discovery in my life, but I could say I first, let's say, earnestly recognized this about somewhere 7 to 8 years ago, okay, when I first earnestly recognized this, and it continues to get subtler and subtler, and each revelation of subtlety is a revelation of greater inherent freedom, because I'm seeing that I am doing it. There's nothing being done to me. So, but as I say, that's getting, I did it. I got ahead of myself. So let's rein it in, and let's get back to, so if we can prove this, then I'm proposing this is very good news. So let's see if we can prove it. Or let's take, I think maybe the scientific method is a better approach here. So we're not gonna, that's why we can keep discovering greater subtleties, because we keep testing the hypothesis. We just have to keep testing it. So we're never fully proving it, but we're testing to see if we can disprove it. So we just keep testing every time, every moment to moment, we're testing. And we're testing to see, we'll find out, can I disprove it? And if we can't disprove it, then this remains our working hypothesis. So let's look and see. So if I am, okay, well, so let's all look right now. Let's just look in our direct experience now. And yeah, so just notice that there's something that seems off somehow. I mean, are you 100% completely at ease and happy and content and satisfied in this moment? 100%. Right. So let's look to see, what is it that seems to be in the way? What is that? Let's look to find out. Let's just look in our direct experience. Let's not think about it. Let's not try to analyze it. Let's not try to tell a story about where it came from. Let's just look right now and see what is its nature. Then what is the nature of whatever seems to be in the way? I want freedom, I want ease, and something seems to be in the way of that. What is that? Let's look. Let's not think about it. Let's look. Let's look in our direct experience. So I really love somatics as a language. I've come to learn this more and more. So somatics is a language for inquiry. And what I mean by that is we can look. So when I say look, we can, I'm really referring to looking somatically. So looking in your direct somatic experience, what does that mean? Okay, that means just notice, observe where you feel and how you feel this problem, this offness. It's not thinking about it. We're not thinking about it. Thinking about it is too, we don't have enough leverage there. Thinking's too superficial, doesn't give us enough leverage. Let's get deeper so that we have more leverage. So we're looking somatically. Just notice where and how you experience this discomfort, this problem, this dis-ease, this restriction, this frustration, whatever it is, whatever word you give to it, it doesn't matter. Just look to notice where and how you experience it right now. It has to be felt, doesn't it? It has to be. You can't just think a problem. It won't work. Just no way. I promise you it's not possible. Because, I mean, you can test this out for yourself right now. Think to yourself, or you could even say it out loud, blah, 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 blah. And let me know, is that a problem for you? It's not a problem. It can't be a problem because it's meaningless to you. But I could tell you, well, in the language of the alien, the Gork aliens from planet Blub, blah, 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 that would be a serious problem. But it's not a serious problem because it's just words, sounds, not a problem. So what is the problem? The problem is not I'm anxious. The problem is not I don't have enough money. The problem is not nobody loves me. The problem is not I'm failing. The problem is not I'm in pain. That's not the problem. The problem is what you can feel it. The feeling is what gives the juice to it. Without the feeling, there is no problem. The thought is just blah, 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 blah. The thoughts and the feelings are coupled, which is why the thoughts often can provoke the sense that there's a problem. But independently, the thoughts are not a problem, just sounds. I say just sounds, like I'm not trying to trivialize sounds. Sounds are amazing, very powerful, but let's also get clear that the vibration of sound is at a grosser level than the vibration of the feeling. So the feeling is deeper, subtler. The feeling has more leverage. So let's just look at the feeling, not the idea about the feeling, not the name of the feeling, not this feeling is a good feeling or this feeling is a bad feeling, this feeling is anger, or this feeling is sadness, or this feeling is indigestion. No, just directly experiencing what is felt. So this is challenging because we're not accustomed to it. We have not been trained to do this, right? We've been trained, our culture trains us to think. That's what we're trained to do. We're trained to think. Thinking is a great skill, but it is not useful for this. So just because you haven't learned how to do it, or you're not particularly skilled at it, doesn't mean that you can't become skilled at it. It just means you're not trained in it. So at first, this kind of thing can seem like, I don't get it, this isn't working, this is stupid, this couldn't possibly work, it's whatever. You can have all kinds of opinions about it. But it does work. Anybody can learn to do it. You can train to do it. It's like riding a bicycle. The difference is that riding a bicycle, you can see somebody riding a bicycle and you can know that person is riding a bicycle. For sure. There's no question about it, right? You see somebody riding a bicycle, you go, that person's riding a bicycle. What's different about this kind of inquiry is that when you don't have, you can't see that somebody's doing it successfully, because the changes are the benefits are perceived inwardly. They're not expressed so much outwardly. And so it's why it's difficult to really assess whether somebody is authentic or not. You don't know. Anybody can talk the talk, you know. I mean, if riding a bicycle didn't manifest as something that somebody could actually bear witness to, anybody could say, hey, I'm an expert bike rider. Okay, but how do you know? You don't know unless you can see it, unless you can witness it. So the challenge here is that sometimes this kind of thing, well, not sometimes, oftentimes, the kind of inquiry that I'm talking about, this can fall prey to skepticism and cynicism, because we say, yeah, I don't know if I really believe it. Maybe that's just a bunch of hooey. Because we can't be witness to the person riding the bicycle. We can't be witness to their inner experience and to really recognize the benefits that that person is experiencing as a result of this kind of inquiry. So we have to just sort of take it on faith until we experience it for ourselves, which is somewhat unfortunate, because I think if people could recognize how awesome it is, then there would be a lot more people doing direct inquiry, because it would just be clearer that there are a lot of benefits. So you kind of just have to take it on faith. But really, honestly, once you catch a glimpse, just the tiniest glimpse, then you know, because you can't really go back and lie to yourself. You will, but not really. You know, you can lie to yourself for a year, but then after a year you'll realize, oh my God, what have I been doing? I've been lying to myself for a year because I had that glimpse. I know that I saw in my direct experience that in fact I'm doing it. So let's take a look again. You see, what is the problem? And look in your direct experience right now. So whatever that is, whatever you think the problem is, don't, just for this moment, don't think about it. So we're not trying to shut down thought. We're just shifting our attention to observe our direct experience of how it is that we actually experience what we're calling the problem. Where and how do we experience this dissatisfaction, unfulfillment, unhappiness, anxiety, frustration, disappointment, and so forth? And let's just look, let's find out. And you'll start to see how perfectly clear this is. It's so clear that you can't even have a thought about it without mucking it up, because the recognition is instantaneous. So I say, okay, well, where and how do you experience this problem? And you know instantly. But then to translate that into thought slows it down. So then it gets all kind of mucked up. That's okay. It's useful to be able to talk about it, to translate it into language, but we have to recognize that the language is imperfect. It's not as clear. But just so that we can again have a transmission, so that we can talk about it and have communication about it. We can say, you'll notice it somewhere in the body, right? It's not like we're not talking about some disembodied thing. It's not a disembodied experience. It's an embodied experience. You perceive it and feel it in the body. Now, we can say that's not quite right, and that's true. We could argue about that, and that's fine. But we don't really want to get so hung up on those sorts of details. Okay, so whether you doesn't matter. You know, maybe you've had glimpses of there's no body. That's fine. This isn't in conflict with that. However you conceive it, it doesn't matter. But you can see and recognize that the experience, the felt experience, is what I would say it's a somatic experience. So I like somatic, the somatic experience, because it's like the interface between the manifest body and our awareness. And our feelings and so forth. So all of that is comes together in the somatic experience. So I would say it's a somatic experience. It's a felt experience. And we normally, in mundane language, we would say that we're experiencing that, we perceive it through the body, somewhere in the body, right? So you get a phone call and you know it's bad news, right? You've gotten those kinds of phone calls and you know it's bad news, and you can feel it before they've even said anything. You know it's bad news. How do you know it's bad news? It says, what is awareness? Is awareness just noticing how you're feeling and not using the mind? Yeah. I mean, in the simple terms, yes. So how do you know it's bad news if nobody said anything? How do you know it's bad news? Because you get the sinking feeling in your gut or wherever, or the tightness in the chest or whatever it is, right? I mean, that's how you know. So uh, so here's the amazing thing. Okay, so be very still for a moment. So notice wherever you feel or sense the problem, the discomfort, the whatever, the oppression. And then just be very still. And the way to be very still is maybe different than what you think. Okay, so I want to clarify this, because we can try to be very still. No. If you try to be very still, what are you going to do? You're going to freeze. You're going to hold yourself still. Hold the breath. But to be still in the way that I'm speaking of is to cease making unnecessary effort. So you go watch people sometime if you can. Okay, just watch people and you'll see. I think I've said this before, but you'll see that people have all kinds of interesting tics. People do a lot of interesting things. We all do. You'll notice people, they they like touch their nose, they run their hand through their hair, they rub their eye, they adjust their neck, shrug their shoulders, they do things, clear their throat, all these things. And you might say, well, of course I have to do those things. I'm uncomfortable. I'm saying, no. Be still. Is it, is it going to kill you not to touch your nose for 5 minutes? Not to clear your throat? And you say, well, I don't know. Well, just try it. Just find out. And then you can just start to observe. And as you're observing, you see your habits. You see all of the complaining, all of the fear, all of the compulsions, and the intensity of the habit to follow through on those compulsions, right? So it all kind of comes together. You have to observe this. So just be still, just quietly be still for just a few moments, and just notice all of the impulses and compulsions to get comfortable, to fix it, to rearrange yourself. And rather than restraining, which would be this tensing to be still, to hold yourself still, rather than doing that, so you're allowed to be moved. I'm not saying you have to be rigid. I'm saying be soft, right? So it's like, be like the willow tree, okay? Be soft. Willow tree is still quite strong. It's not moving about wildly. It's rooted, but it's soft. It's yielding. It can be responsive. So we want to be like that just for a moment, just for now, just for a few moments, so that we can observe our experience. So notice wherever the discomfort is, and plenty of discomforts will come up. It's an amazing thing. You just be still for a few moments and so many discomforts come up. But you start to see, okay, these discomforts are very familiar, aren't they? I mean, it's not like foreign. You still know it's you, because you're like, oh yeah, there's that thing. Oh, there's that thing. Oh yeah, that happens all the time. Oh, there's that thing. You start to recognize yourself, like you're watching other people. You can watch other people and see all their tics. You watch yourself and see all your own tics. And then you start to see how you compulsively, habitually try and avoid the discomfort with the tics, right? So there's that discomfort. Oh, okay, there. Okay, got past it, cleared the throat. I'm not saying you're not allowed to clear your throat. I clear my throat a lot. Okay, but I'm just saying it can be useful just to observe. You're sitting there and you're just being, and you notice, wow, I got to do that thing with the nose. I got to do it. Just see that you just start to see that you do these things. You're doing these things, and every one of them is like leapfrog over the supposed enemy. So we're avoiding it. We're not seeing it, which allows us to keep projecting it out there. But let's not do that. Let's, instead of leaping over, let's just be still. And let's start to actually explore the discomfort. I mean, this is why I'm saying this is radically different. We are not trying to solve the discomfort. We're not trying to get rid of it, which is so different, because everything else is designed to get rid of the discomfort. And God knows we all want to get rid of the discomfort, but it has been a complete and utter failure. Hasn't it? We have completely failed in that endeavor. So let's admit defeat, and let's actually take a look and see, what have we been doing? We were fighting with the enemy out there that was a phantom. So no wonder we lost. let's actually get to know. So there's like the I think it's like from the art of war or something like that. It's I maybe I'm making that up, but it's like one of those Chinese uh expressions. You know, you keep your enemies, keep your friends close and your enemies closer. But you want to keep your enemies closer. You want to actually don't push them out there. You push them out there, and then you're living in constant anxiety and dread. What are the enemies doing? So instead, let's be still and let's actually find out what is the actual nature of this discomfort that I've been leaping over and adjusting and avoiding and trying to solve my whole life with all of these elaborate practices and rituals when I say practices and rituals, I'm not talking about spiritual stuff that you've learned. I'm talking about just like the like coping mechanisms that we've learned, ways that we've learned just to get by, hiding, lying, pouting, yelling, numbing, all these strategies. So let's not indulge any of those for a moment, and let's actually look directly and let's see, how do I do this? Okay, so here's this discomfort. And I think the discomfort is the enemy, but wait a second, let's find out. Let me actually find out. If I don't indulge the compulsions, all the habits that I have for trying to manage and fix this discomfort, what do I actually discover? And here, to me, this is if I could package this up and give this to people, I would be very happy, because I mean, maybe I wouldn't be happy, maybe that would be horrible, but I have this desire to give this to people, because I want everybody to see this, because this is such a big deal. Changes everything. So really, when you see this, when you're just still, you got to start to be really curious. Well, what is this discomfort? You ever really wondered about that? What is it? Am I going to be satisfied to go to my grave just saying, well, it was discomfort? Really? Let's say, take the Christian theme, and you get to the gates of heaven, because we're all going to heaven, of course. And I think St. Peter is there at the gates, pearly gates, right? And he says, okay, well, what did you do with your life? And you're like, well, gosh, I don't know. Made some money, lost some money, tried to do good, failed a lot. St. Peter's going to say, well, did you ever figure out what the discomfort was? You're going to say, my God, I never did even think to look, because everybody was telling me, just get rid of it, avoid it. You say, well, sorry, you got to go back. Try again. So let's look now. What is this discomfort? Isn't that curious? Aren't you curious to know about the discomfort? I mean, you've been running from it your whole life. Don't you want to know what it is for sure, for real? Because what if you were wrong? Okay, what if you've been running and running and running and running and running and running, and what if all along this discomfort has just been chasing after you? It's like, hey, you won the lottery. I'm just trying to bring you your prize. it's it's pure love. Your prize is pure eternal love. You're like, get away from me. So don't you want to know? Don't you want to know for real? Or are you satisfied just to go to your grave with just calling it discomfort, calling it fear, calling it anxiety? So let's actually really sincerely be curious, because I'm telling you, this is a big deal. Your whole, I'm telling you for sure, your whole life, the vast majority of your energy has been sucked up by this chronic escape plan, this chronic avoidance, this chronic attempt to leapfrog over the problem, to get rid of the discomfort. And that you will find great ease and sooner or later joy when you really become familiar with what you've called discomfort or oppression. So be curious about it. Take a look right now. And here's something that I found that is a good test. So this is something that, again, one of the reasons I really like somatics as a language for inquiry is that I find it's with somatics, we actually can have measurable, visible outcome, sort of like you can see somebody riding a bike. With somatics, you can actually have what we call like an objective measure of some kind of shift, that you can actually perceive that there is a softening taking place. And so so this is a subtler, what I'm proposing to you now is a very subtle thing. I'm inclined increasingly to, and I'm increasingly inclined to to bring more of this, the more movement-based somatic work out into these discussions, and I may well start doing that, because I think the movement-based somatic work is less subtle, still fairly subtle, but it's less subtle, and it can be a really nice way to sort of ease in to the subtler inquiry. But we're doing the subtle inquiry now. Okay, so you can just notice that this discomfort, oppression, pain, frustration, disappointment, whatever, that if you're really curious about it and you really explore, you'll start to notice, well, ask yourself this question: is it possible for me to soften so you can't just ask it as a question, like, like, is it possible? Is it possible? Is it possible? What about now? Is it possible now? You have to actually, the question has to be one that directs your intention, right? So you're asking the question, and then you're really getting curious. Okay, could I soften? And the reason I was saying that the somatics is I love the somatics as a language is because what I find with the movement-based somatic work is I can do a movement. So you could do it with anything, but since your hands are accessible, you could just maybe take your fingers of one hand and place them on the other hand anywhere and just kind of play around and find anywhere in the hand that feels slightly tense. Okay, and then wherever you find that point that feels slightly tense, you could just then keep the fingers there with gentle pressure, just so you can feel the tension, and then slowly move and release the hand that you're touching, and and then have the intention, this curiosity, can I soften in this area where I'm noticing this tension? And what you will find sooner or later is that you'll find, holy cow, I can. And so what I find is so useful about that is then there are these areas in the body where we will have gone our whole lives assuming that's just how it is. Just say, well, that's just how it is. I don't know. I thought that's just how it was. I thought that part was just supposed to be like that. I thought everybody's body did that. Just thought that's how God made me. But then you discover through this kind of inquiry, well, wait a second, that part there that I had no idea really what that was, it's just sort of this vague discomfort, vague sense of like, I don't really want to know, right? A lot of people, they say, oh, well, as I get older, I can't kneel down. Can't kneel down, it's painful on my knees. Really? Well, why? Why would that be? Think about that. Why would that be? It's crazy. There's no good reason for that. So you have to start to wonder, well, why? Why is that? Why is it that why is it some people can touch their toes and some people can't? Why would that be? Isn't that curious? I know the answer. I know the answer to that. It's not the thing, it's not the answer you think. The answer is because it's not because there's damage in the body of some people. The answer is not because some people were just born with a gift. It's not some people have greater flexibility just inherently. No, absolutely not. The reason is because there are sensory motor control has been lost due to avoidance and due to inefficient use, because it's been avoided. So therefore it's been in the nervous system, it's just been downgraded. You don't need this. You don't do it. You don't take advantage of it. You don't need it. Here, we'll downgrade your ability to kneel with comfort. And instead of that, we're going to upgrade your ability to worry. Why? Because you worry a lot. Clearly, you need to have an upgraded capacity for worry because you do it all the time. You don't need to be able to kneel with comfort because you don't do it. I'm telling you, that's the truth. And so with this somatic inquiry, you can discover this for yourself. And it's absolutely revolutionary and mind-blowing and liberating every time. Because every time you rediscover a new subtlety to the same core insight, which is, I have been doing this to myself. I have been doing it to myself. So why do you have pain in the knees when you kneel? Because your nervous system, like I said, has downgraded that. And so what happens is you've lost fine motor control. You can regain it, but you've lost it because it's been downgraded. And therefore, you've got all of this soft tissue, fascia and muscles that are chronically tight, that don't move in a coordinated, efficient pattern. And so that's what feeds back into your brain. And since your brain doesn't know what to do with that because it's not sensitive to that area, it just says pain. That's like you understand, that's the pain is a product of the nervous system. Pain is what the nervous system produces when it doesn't know what else to do. Doesn't that make sense? If it doesn't know what else to do, it's going to produce pain. Why? Because pain stops you. When the nervous system doesn't know what to do, it's going to say, look, fundamentally, I'm conservative. I don't want you to die. So just stop because I don't know what else to do. Produces pain. That's what pain is. And it's the same at all levels. That's why I'm saying somatics is a language for inquiry, because you follow that into subtler dimensions and you see the same is true at all levels of your experience. So this core sense that there's a problem, that something's not right, that something's off, or when you're in the heat of the argument with your spouse, or when you're frustrated with your employer or your neighbor or the weather or the government or whoever, you can see it's the same thing. So what is happening is that there's a conditioned reactivity, and because we habitually try to avoid it, we don't look at it. Therefore, we don't gain greater clarity about its actual nature. And what is the brain, what is the nervous system going to do? It's going to produce pain. Because in the absence of clarity, clear information, clear understanding of the actual nature of the experience, the nervous system is going to produce pain. That pain will manifest as physical pain, emotional pain, excessive worry, thinking, problem solving, Googling your symptoms. So what I'm proposing is that when we see what is actually happening, this is a very, very, very good news. So why I said we were getting ahead of ourselves when I said that at the beginning, but it's like, this is such good news. Because this, you look at this and you will see, I promise you, that whatever the problem, whatever you perceive the problem is, it is something that you are doing, albeit up to now unconsciously. It's just a programmed reactive thing that you do, like touching the nose, clearing the throat, doing this to the neck, whatever you do. Internally, we also do the same thing. Anytime the phone rings and the circumstances are such that we are predicting it's going to be bad news, we're reading the signals, and then we tense up in the abdomen. And then we say, oh God, there it is. I know. You know, because you don't know, but you're producing that. So this is why I also said, though, that in order to really know or come to know the oppression or the enemy or the discomfort or however you conceive of it, is to step into the unknown, right? Because we don't know it. We don't know it. We've avoided it. So to know it means to step into the unknown. And this is why it's radically different than everything else, is because this is not something where you do the thing and then you feel better. That would be nice, but this is not one of those things. This is where you look and you keep looking and discover what it is that you're doing, and then you explore softening, i.e. not doing that thing. So you notice, okay, there's that compulsion to tense up in that way, subtle inward posture. When my spouse gives me that look, that's what I'm doing. You start to observe, because what you have to be curious, don't you? I mean, you ever had the experience, you wake up, seem to be in a good mood, come downstairs, there's your spouse is in a bad mood, and now all of a sudden you're in a bad mood. What's that all about? Contagious? So again, it points to, it's got to be something I'm doing, because otherwise like, we're back to these two possibilities. One is it's an external force that oppresses me, and then I'm that does not sound promising. Or it's something that I'm doing. So let's really take a look. Let's see, if I'm seem to be fine, I'm seem to be in a good mood, I come downstairs and see my spouse, and my spouse seems to be in a bad mood, and all of a sudden I'm in a bad mood. What has happened? Don't we want to know? I want to know. I want to look. I want to see what's going on. How did this bad mood come about all of a sudden? What on earth is it? How does a bad mood get transferred? How does it spread? And what I find is that all of these things come about as these largely unconscious conditioned reactions. But when, like, kneeling is painful until it's not, if we're willing to explore it, that's the thing, is if we're willing to explore it in a gentle, safe way, we start to discover, oh, well, for 20 years I thought I couldn't do this because I had this vague sense in my mind, well, I just can't, it's painful. But I start to actually explore it, I start to discover, oh, I didn't realize I was doing that. Now I see that I'm doing that. Well, I'm not going to do that anymore. Oh, that's nicer. Now I can kneel. And in the same way, when I go downstairs and my wife is in a bad mood, and then I find that I'm in a bad mood, I have two choices. I can just continue to do what I've always done, which is assume, well, my wife's in a bad mood, I'm going to be in a bad mood, so now she's the enemy, and her bad mood is the enemy. You know, I can try cheering her up, but if that doesn't work, then I'm even more defeated. Then I start thinking, well, screw this. I want a divorce. I don't need anybody ruining my day. So that sounds miserable, but doesn't that sound familiar? Isn't that like our lives? And what I'm saying is there's another way. The other way is I come downstairs, my wife's in a bad mood. I notice I'm in a bad mood all of a sudden, and I'm like, well, what just happened? Let me take a look. Rather than speculating, let me take a look. What is this bad mood? What is it? I want to know. So I look. Oh, oh, isn't that funny? The bad mood. There it is. There's the bad mood. I've located it. There it is. I can locate it. It's not. That's why I say it's instantaneous. As soon as you stop trying to think about it and analyze it, it's like, well, there it is. It's been obvious all along. There it is. It's right there. I feel it right there. That's the bad mood. Bad mood isn't over there. It's not over there. It's not over there. It's not up there. It's here, right here. I feel it. Okay. Now let me be really, really curious about the nature of this bad mood. I've located it, but now let me really be curious. What is the nature of it? Well, it's fairly hard, contracted. Well, now I've got a couple options. I could just assume that's just what it is. Just that's just going to be how it is. Could just assume that. That's a possibility. That doesn't sound too nice. I could assume that, okay, I've identified the enemy and I'm attack. Okay, I could do that. Get out my sword and attack it. But you know, these things, they're like they're like hydras. You know what a hydra is? It's the mythological creature that every time you cut off the head, another one grows. It's got all those heads. So it's like that. You know, every time you cut off the head, another head grows. So I think we've all probably learned that attacking is not a very successful strategy. So what other options are available? I'm saying, okay, let's actually be really curious. Let me look at a deeper level. Let me look even more deeply. In order to look more deeply, I have to be more still. It's not restraint, it's just to gently inhibit the indulgence of the compulsions to adjust and fix and so forth. So then I start to see, and the more I see, and the more subtle I allow myself to be in that exploration, what's happening is I'm not indulging those things, and eventually there won't be enough of whatever it is to hold itself together, because how was it being held together? By me. It was being held together by me because I was avoiding it. I was going around it. I was hopping over it. So it was just getting, it's like when you've got, it's like your junk drawer. Everybody's got a junk drawer. The drawer for stuff that you don't know what else to do with it. You got one of those things. You're like, I don't know. I don't know. Hey, what do I do with this extra pen? I don't know. Put it in the junk drawer. What should I do with these scissors? Put it in the junk drawer. What about this thing that broke off of that thing that we don't really know what to do with it? Put it in the junk drawer. Rubber band, put it in the junk drawer. Paper clip, put it in the junk drawer. Batteries, we're not sure if they're still good or not. Put them in the junk drawer. You put all the stuff in the junk drawer, and then what happens eventually is you're like, I don't want to go in there. It's a mess. So it's like that. Every time we leap over it, we're just more stuff accumulates in there. More, well, it's like it just gets tangled, gets messy, more stuff stuck in there. So now I'm proposing we look in there. We take inventory. So it's when we don't know, then it just seems overwhelming. Oh God, the junk drawer. Could be days of work to sort that out. I don't want to look in there. No idea what's in there. Could be nuclear waste in there. It's best not to touch it. But when you actually start to look, then you see it for what it is. Like, oh, it's just the junk drawer. You know what? Most of that is trash. It's not really something you have to work so hard to try to avoid. You just see it. And it kind of, unlike the junk drawer, which would still require some doing on your part to get it all sorted out, when you just look repeatedly at the actual nature of your experience, the problem dissolves because you're no longer doing the problem. Because you start to realize, so, back to the specific question about anxiety. So, if the anxiety is not uh, doing, if the anxiety is not harming me, and instead the proposal is I'm doing the anxiety, I start to take a look and I start to realize and see the subtleties of how I do anxiety. The more I become aware of that, since I don't like anxiety, I'm going to cease to do it. It's the thing about it though, is there's a certain amount of seeing that's necessary. So we can't just catch one glimpse and then say, okay, I don't want to do anymore. Shouldn't that just work? No, it doesn't work, because you've got the momentum of avoidance. It's pretty strong. So you have to look fairly persistently, and you have to let it settle enough that you can see. Because at first you say, okay, fine, I'll look, but we're kind of like looking. I'm looking. I don't want to really look. Eventually you settle down and you actually see. You just see it. That's the point, and you can feel it in the whole body. The whole body starts to soften, and that's the point at which something is actually shifting. And in that seeing, there's clarity, there are insights, and then you don't have to do it, right? I mean, when you see that, well, I don't like a bad mood, and I now see that when my wife is in a bad mood and then I'm suddenly in a bad mood, that I'm just doing the bad mood. I'm not going to do that anymore. Now that event, at first it requires that you're present to it and choosing not to indulge that habit. But you can do it because you've got the awareness of it now. If you have the awareness of it, you can make that choice. If you don't have the awareness, you can't make the choice because you don't know. But when you have the awareness, you can choose. So your first step is you see, have the awareness of it, and then from there on, anytime that this recurs, you can choose. You can choose to soften, not to indulge that habit. And eventually, because it's so much more pleasant not to take on a bad mood for no reason, no good reason at all, then you just stop doing it. But at first it takes some application. You have to be committed to it. But eventually that just becomes the new norm, because why would you continue to do something that you've now proved to yourself is unpleasant and that you don't need to do? So there was another question, which is, what about the other possibilities of outer circumstances that can have effect? There, I was doing that thing with my nose. What about, I don't know, what about the other, you'll have to elaborate. What about the outer circumstances that can have an effect? I'm just not sure what you're meaning. We talked about the inner oppression. What about the outer circumstances, like you said, government, sometimes people? Oh yeah, well, right. So what I'm saying is that all of those are stories. That's all I was pointing to, is that all of those are stories. I'm not proposing that there is not outer, that there are not outer expressions of oppression. I mean, we could argue about that, but it seems like there is. It does seem like there are institutions and organizations that oppress others. But the question that I'm exploring here is that it's not about outer manifestations of oppression. It's about your perception of it, because we can tell a story about anything and say that it's oppressive. I mean, my God, gravity, so oppressive. Or it's like, it's all oppressive if you make it so. But the problem is, I mean, I think most of us get to a point in our lives where we realize we're not going to organize and arrange all of the outer stuff in a way that will be agreeable to our present ideas, so that we can then enjoy being right, because that doesn't seem to actually work, right? I mean, you can rail against the systems, but there's always going to be something that you could say that's the outer oppressor. What I'm interested in is what can you actually do? So in addition to whatever else you might do, you could petition, write letters, you could, whatever you're going to do, write books, organize, protests, whatever you're going to do. You can do those things, and at the same time, you can take a look within yourself and discover what the actual experience of the oppression is. Because fundamentally, and this is why some people harp on the a sense of self separation, is if you don't have a sense of if you had no sense of self at all, you couldn't possibly perceive oppression. What would that mean? It wouldn't mean anything. It's just stuff happening. So fundamentally, oppression is it's a perception. There is not really an objective oppression. It's always a perception. It's always a story. So what I'm really interested in with this inquiry is that we can see for ourselves our experience of oppression, and we can inquire into that, and we can get clear for ourselves about what is the actual nature of that, and what then, if anything, do we need to do. And I'm proposing really just the seeing is all that's needed, because in the seeing, if we're just true to that, if we're really true to the seeing and we just continue to see, rather, because at any point, if we indulge the compulsion to do something, which we do, but when we do that, what we're doing is we're not seeing, right? Because we're either seeing or we're doing. We're not seeing and doing. So to see, we have to inhibit the doing. So if we're true to the seeing, then we continue to see with greater subtlety and depth, and we're not indulging the compulsions, and therefore we're not experiencing oppression. I would say you can't see and experience oppression at the same time. You can see and then experience oppression if you if you choose. So that's it was a longer spiel than I thought, but that's the end of my spiel for today. So any if you have anybody has any questions or comments, happy to hear from you. You can either speak knowing that will be included in the recording going publicly on YouTube, or you can type in the chat. And give them a minute for that. If nobody has anything to say, then it's a beautiful day. It's my daughter's birthday, so go celebrate that with her.
Hey, Joey.
Hey.
I have a comment.
Yep.
Let me see if I can remember it, because I usually forget when I decide to say something. I find it very helpful to slow things down and observe my inner tendencies, and I find a lot of difficulties, and so that's a good thing, because when I find a difficulty, that gives me, that's like an opportunity to to learn something new, and it feels great,
Hmm.
and it's very wonderful.
Yeah,
And so thank you very much.
good. And that's wonderful. And uh, one thing I've noticed that I will share with you is that the difficulties can it's possible to allow the difficulties to be in, instantaneously released. And what I mean by that is that sometimes I notice a struggle to try and like, oh, I got another difficulty. Okay, good. Now I'm gonna, I gotta do something with it. I gotta, it's gonna be so good when I get through it. And uh, there's a shortcut available, which is that you just get right to it and just let it go.
Yeah, the shortcut's great.
Hmm.
There's no reason to fight with something that you can't really win against.
Right. Especially when it has something for you. That's the thing is, and people will say, oh, well, that's spiritual bypassing. It's not spiritual bypassing. It's presence. Like this has a message for you, and whatever it is. It's always a very simple message. It doesn't have to be a message that you're cognizing. You don't need to think about it. You can just receive it, and you receive it through presence. It's that simple. You don't like how long do you need to, how big of a dramatic production do you need to make out of receiving a simple message? But sometimes people think if you're not making a dramatic production out of it, then it's spiritual bypassing. Like you've got to suffer in order to grow or learn or benefit. It's like, why? It's a simple message. You can receive it. You think there's no end to the amounts of messages. There's no end to the amount of growth and opportunity and discovery and liberation. Like that's endless. So why not just enjoy that now? Why put it off? You don't need to. I'm struggling so that I don't indulge spiritual bypassing. Like, okay, hope that goes well for you. So it's not necessary though. So yeah. So I'm a big fan of the shortcut, but it has to be an authentic shortcut. That's always the thing is, I think people, it's always a process of honesty and, well, I think honesty, radical honesty. We just have to be radically honest, and as long as we're radically honest, then we're on the right path.
Yeah, that's another thing is there are actually two shortcuts. One is you can lie to yourself about something,
Mhm.
and the other you're honest about something. And
Yeah,
so learning the difference between the two is an amazing experience.
right. Good. Happy to hear it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Shy crowd.
Joey, can I go?
Sure. Yeah.
Oh, when you talk about awareness, until now, it's for me the experience has been just to let go of the resistance and feel somatically how I'm tensing up and
Hmm.
see the stories of the mind rather than being present with the experience, with the direct experience rather than what it is.
Hmm.
That has shifted. Um, I, I've seen many other videos on what awareness is, and I don't know what they're talking about, but
Hmm.
this gives me like a practical
Hmm.
sense of what it might, what stillness is, um, what present moment is. For me, the present moment is directly experiencing physically what the direct experience is, rather than the story about it, rather than the mind's interpretation, thoughts about it, rather than what future might look like.
Yeah.
So that has been it. But my question is, what? So for me, that's what I know. But what when you talk about awareness of awareness, people, I don't know what that is. When you talk about consciousness, it's like I don't know what those terms are, but you refer it pretty frequently. But when you talk about awareness of awareness, people talk like people say like this is you're a seer. You see. You're a seer, not a doer.
Yeah.
There's no doing. There's just you're just observing. This awareness, which is even what I know is just I have these emotions. That is like the most primary sense of who I am. Like I'm just that's what I know. But people say like there's even more. There's something even behind, like behind it. That is awareness, and I don't know what that is. So can you?
Well, yeah, because of course you can't in the sense of the normal, the habitual, conventional mode of how we perceive ourselves to be things. We can't make sense of that because it's not a thing. I mean, you've heard this before, okay? But it's helpful to understand that you're not going to fit it into a box. You're not going to conceptually make sense of it. You're not going to arrive at the answer in that way. So you can just give up on that. It's not needed. It won't happen. But you can start to notice that you know that you're aware without having to know what awareness is. You know that you're aware, and you know that this awareness is primary. What I mean by that is without awareness, you're not aware of anything, right? So everything else is dependent upon awareness. If you're not aware, then you don't have any experience.
Oh yeah.
Your experience is dependent upon awareness. But awareness is not dependent upon experience. So awareness of awareness is referring to awareness of awareness of awareness, awareness of non-object, awareness of awareness without an object. So the normal habit is you're aware of objects, and so it sets up this relationship of subject and object.
Oh, what do you mean by that?
Well, you're the subject and the object's up there. You're always observing at a distance, right? You're observing, whether you're observing the screen, or you're observing a person over there, or you're observing the landscape, or you're observing your feelings. There's always a distinction. You're the observer, and that thing is the observed. So awareness of awareness, there's no object. It's a kind of withdrawal from the tendency to go out toward objects and to create separation by creating this subject-object relationship. And then you can simply recognize presently that you are aware. You are just aware without going to an object. And so what happens is awareness just naturally, it's aware. Awareness has to be aware. Awareness can be aware of itself, not as an object. So it's resting. It's very simple. It's very, I mean, it's not a, I mean, if you just rest now, you just rest your, notice the tendency to move out toward things, toward objects. There's a certain amount of effort involved in that. If you just rest that, then you notice you're still aware.
Mhm.
And awareness is curious in a sense of what is this? But if you're not going out toward objects, then you're just aware of awareness. It's totally natural. It's not something that, it's not a special thing. It's very, very natural. Everybody can do it. In a sense, because it's, in some sense, it's always happening. Maybe just not consciously, but because of that, it's really easy to overlook. Because people are always looking for something special or extraordinary. It's very, very, very simple, very natural. Everybody's already aware. So it's not a special thing in that sense, but very simple. Just, you're just aware. And then you just don't, it's the same basic premise of everything else that we've been exploring in this talk today, because you're just noticing there's a subtle impulse to project something and to move toward it.
That's the
And you
object,
just,
right?
yes. And so you just start, as you just become increasingly aware of the subtleties of this dynamic, then you start to realize, well, maybe I'm doing that.
Hmm.
And you just start to explore that, and you notice, well, what if I make, what effort am I making? What if I just don't make that effort? And you start to notice that if you don't make that effort, it doesn't happen.
That's all I know is of
Yeah.
not making the effort.
Yeah.
But I have to sit through with this. I'm not really sure exactly what this is, the awareness of awareness, but I'll
Yeah.
have to hear it in different perspectives probably. But as you said, I'm already know what that is, but
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, anytime that you're not objectifying, which
Mhm.
happens, right? Like if you're just sitting, right? You're not doing anything. You're not thinking. Sometimes it happens, right? Sometimes you just catch yourself and you haven't been daydreaming, you're not thinking, you were perfectly aware, but you weren't really doing anything.
Mhm.
You're just aware.
Hmm.
That's it.
No
Awareness.
grasping. Thanks. Yeah.
And then you start to notice that what happens is then you start kind of like trying to get orient yourself, like, oh, wait, what just happened there? Oh, okay, tree, hand, right? Then you start to objectify, but it starts to become so, the more you explore it, the more you realize it's totally natural, it's effortless, it's already the case. And without, it really does require, I would say actually, a considerable amount of totally unnecessary effort to objectify. So as you become aware of it, it has benefits. It has a lot of benefits to rest as awareness of awareness, because then you're not wasting energy needlessly objectifying for what? I mean, like, really, is that needed right now? Tree, is that needed? I mean, who needs that? It's only needed if, I mean, objectification is a useful skill, right? Because then we can communicate.
Hmm.
I can say you and me and here and there, and we can communicate in that way. But if we're not actively doing that, why do I need to invest energy needlessly into objectification? It's just not needed. So
Yeah, as you pointed out last week, it's not about what you want, it's what you don't want
yeah.
is it's not about knowing what awareness is, it's knowing what not awareness is. Not awareness is just objectification of everything, and
Yeah.
probably if I don't do that, that is awareness.
Yeah.
Yep.
Now I think I'm going to go because the birthday party's starting in a few minutes.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. See you next time.